All right, welcome to Network Plus Guide to Networks 8th edition, Chapter 9, Network Risk Management. This chapter, I'm hoping that by the end we'll be able to identify the people, the technology, malware, security risks to our networks, be able to look at tools that we're going to use to evaluate our network, look at basic security methods, physical security methods that will help prevent and detect our intrusions. Some basic stuff on how to increase our security and configure some devices, and describe the various security policies that you may want to put in place, and really how to educate our users. I have to get some basic terms out of the way, and one of those terms would be hacker, right? And as we all know, a hacker is a someone who uh, knows how to get into certain devices and security, uh, PCs, uh, software, uh, and in essence knows how to exploit some of those holes. Today, I mean, we used to have it used to be called a hacker and a cracker. Uh, Today, we just call them white hat, black hat, and gray hats. Uh, Today, the hacker is used to describe any individual who gains unauthorized access into a system. Now, that can be something as simple as somebody who knows someone's password and username and password and uses that username and password to gain access to a resource. That's a hack. Or someone who actually uses hacking tools to infiltrate a system to gain access and then, depending on what they want to do with it, maybe malicious intent, or they're just trying to show off. You never know. Um, but that's what a hacker is today. Uh, Also, a there's different kinds of hackers, as I mentioned earlier. We have a white hat hacker. Okay, a white hat hacker. It would be a security expert that is hired by an organization. Their job is to find the vulnerabilities and report those vulnerabilities back to the institution who hired them. This is called ethical hacking. There's a fine line in many cases between an ethical hacker and a non-ethical hacker. The white hat hacker, the IT experts, their goal is to identify security vulnerabilities of all kinds so that an organization can make the change that they need to um, increase their own security and what we call harden the network. For a white hat hacker, at no point would private data be compromised outside of the trusted relationship that they would have. Then there's the black hat hacker, groups or individuals that use their skills to bypass security systems, to cause damage, to steal data, to compromise privacy. Okay? They're not concerned about legal restrictions. Uh, they have an intent of achieving personal gain. Uh, they want to execute their personal agendas. Some black hat hackers are groups that are also available for hire to serve somebody else's agenda. Then you got the gray hat hacker. All right, these hackers abide by a code of ethics all of their own. Although they might engage in illegal activity, their intent is to educate and to assist. Um, uh, so, for example, a computer hobbyist who hacks a local business's weak Wi-Fi password and then reports that weakness to the business owners without damaging or stealing the company's data. They, in turn, would have engaged in gray hat hacking. Gray hats are vulnerable to legal prosecution and therefore often go to a great deal of effort to remain anonymous. So as you can see, some people attempting to break through a network security are doing so with the organization's permission and cooperation. Which brings us into some other definitions that we need to look into. Okay, a weakness of a system, weakness of a process or the architecture, uh, that could lead to compromised information or unauthorized access is known as vulnerability. The act of taking advantage of that vulnerability is known as an exploit. So, for example, if you've already learned about the possibility of unauthorized or rogue access points to make themselves available to wireless clients as an evil twin, once unsuspecting clients associate with such access points, the hacker can then steal data in transit or access information in the client's system. The evil twin masquerades as a valid access point using the same SSID and potentially other identical settings. These exploits take advantage of a vulnerability inherent in wireless communication in which the SSIDs are openly broadcasted to Wi-Fi clients. The next would be something called a zero-day exploit, also called a zero-day attack. This is one that takes advantage of a software vulnerability that hasn't yet or has only been recently become public. Zero-day exploits are particularly dangerous because the vulnerability is exploited before the software developers have the opportunity to provide a solution for it, or before a user applies the published solution. An example of that would be Microsoft schedules regular security updates to Windows on the second Tuesday of each month. It's called the Tuesday patch. Hackers can use this information to identify unannounced vulnerabilities in Windows and then immediately proceed to attack the unpatched machines. Due to the quick timing of these attacks, the day after a patch Tuesday, it's informally dubbed Exploit Wednesday. Most of current vulnerabilities, however, are well known. So throughout this lesson, you're going to learn about several kinds of exploits and how to prevent or counteract these security threats. More than half of all security breaches come up as human error, what we call people risks. Okay? Sometimes it's just downright laziness. Others are social engineering, perhaps taking advantage of somebody's kindness or politeness. A perfect example would be somebody standing behind you when you're typing in your username and password, and they're not willing to tell you to please back up or look away when they type that in, and they're shoulder surfing, or somehow they get you to offer up username or password information, little things like finding out, your first grade teacher, or your first elementary school, or your favorite teacher, or your dog's name, or your cat's name, and in the end, finding out information that would be, say, like your security questions. Other types of social engineering that a lot of people are falling prey to right now are phishing, or even vishing. Phishing is sending out emails or electronic communication that appears to come from a legitimate person or an organization, and that requests access or authentication information. All it really takes is one bad click. If you get an email from PayPal asking you to update your credentials and you're to follow a link, it is always my suggestion to you that you log into PayPal on your own and not follow that link. Okay? Baiting is a malware-infected file that, such as a free music download or a device like a USB flash drive, where it's seemingly left unguarded for someone to take. If you're walking down the street and you see a flash drive on the ground, do not pick it up and put it in your computer. There could be software on that flash drive that will automatically load onto your PC and turn it into a bot. Quid pro quo is a free gift or service may be offered in exchange for private information, effective with employees who have not been adequately trained to detect social engineering attempts. And tailgating is a person posing as an employee or delivery or service provider, follows an unauthorized employee into a restricted area. So, for example, a delivery person carrying a large box might ask someone to hold the door for them, okay? Where you hold the door for them and they didn't have to use their passcode or anything to get into the building. Phishing emails, okay, often include legitimate logos, okay, like an Office 365 logo, even though it might not be real. Hackers will use psychological insights to develop and refine their techniques. The more you understand their processes, you can then teach your coworkers about these techniques. The most important defense about social engineering is employee training. Teaching your employees not to click. It is better to be proactive on your networks than reactive. Another risk that we have to deal with are people in our own companies. Someone who is trusted by an organization who then uses the information that they have access to and then uses it against the organization. Okay? Some people have malicious intent. Some people may just be wanting to snoop around. It is important that we try to use something called the principle of least privilege. Okay? Meaning that employees and contractors are only given enough access to do their job and not given any more. It's also important that we do background checks for our employees. Okay? And then also something called DLP, or data loss prevention, a solution that will identify sensitive data on the network, prevent it from being copied, like downloading to a flash drive or transmitted off the network. Something like putting it in the cloud in your Google Drive, or even emailing it to somebody. These are all risks of technology that we have to be cautious of. And of course, we always want to be super trustworthy of everyone in our organization, but it's never quite that easy. So some of the risks that we have are just inherent to the network hardware and the design of our networks. Okay? A spoofing attack. Okay? We've talked before about how every network card in every device has a unique MAC address. But what if we were to clone the MAC address of another machine on the network? If that were to happen, it would be next to impossible to know which device we were actually going to be sending our data out to. So a MAC address can be impersonated in an attack called a spoofing. Another types of spoofing attacks involve impersonating IP addresses. IP address spoofing can result in what's called a denial of service attack, or a modified DNS message. Different types of these attacks would be denial of service, which occurs when a legitimate user is unable to access normal network resources, such as a web server. Because of an attacker's intervention, most often this type of attack is achieved by flooding the system with so many requests for services that it can't respond to them. As a result, all data transmissions are then disrupted. This incursion is a relatively simple attack to launch. For example, a hacker could just create a looping program that sends thousands of email messages. And there would be an example of a denial of service attack. Now, we could also do a denial of service attack where it comes from one or even a few sources owned by the attacker. These, what we call DDoS attacks, or denial of service attacks, are orchestrated through many sources. In this figure, most of these machines are what we call zombies, which means the owners are unaware of their computers and are being used in a coordinated attack. Malware called a bot is installed in each of these machines, and then gives the bot herder, or a central controller, remote control of the computers. here we just have a spoof or an ICMP, um, uh, what's called a distributed reflection DDoS attack. It's a DDoS which is bounced off uninfected computers called reflectors before they're being directed back at the target. This is achieved by spoofing the IP source in the attack to make it look like all the requests for responses are being sent by the target machine. Okay? Then we have amplified DDoS attacks that can be amplified when conducted using small, simple requests that trigger very large responses. Okay? These kinds of attacks, such as DNS, network time protocol, ICMPs, SNMPs, and then we have permanent DOS attacks, which attack and damage devices' firmware beyond repair. This is called bricking the device because it effectively turns the device into a brick, makes it useless. The permanent DOS attacks usually target routers or switches. Okay? We can have a friendly DOS attack, which is an unintentional DOS attack or a friendly attack. It's done with is not done with malicious intent. An example might be when a website is flooded with an unexpected high amount of shopping traffic during, say, a flash sale or when a significant event is reported in the news, and then people flood to a certain website. Okay? We have DNS poisoning or DNS spoofing, which by altering DNS records on a DNS server, an attacker can then redirect internet traffic from legitimate web server to a phishing website. Okay? This is called DNS poisoning. Basically, you're being redirected to a false site. We also have ARP poisoning, which is similar to DNS, but it uses the ARP tables, which you remember, which is a table that caches all of our MAC address information. We have a man-in-the-middle attack, which relies on an intercepted transmission that can take several forms. In all these forms, a person redirects and captures secure transmissions as they occur. So, for example, in the case of an evil twin, which is a type of man-in-the-middle attack, a hacker could intercept a transmission between the clients and rogue access points, and then through these captured transmissions, the attacker can learn users' passwords or even supply users with phony websites that look valid but presents clickable options capable of harming their systems. Okay. We can also have a rogue DHCP server, which runs on a client's device, but then can be used as a man-in-the-middle attack. So we're giving the client false DHCP information, which then causes the client to then talk to the rogue network. Okay? We also have something in here called a deauthentication attack. And in the deauthentication attack, a Wi-Fi client is legitimately connected to a wireless access point. The access point or the client can then send a deauthentication frame to tell the other device that the authentication session is being terminated. This can happen for any number of reasons, including inactivity. The client is then leaving the area, and then the AP is overwhelmed with too many clients or an unspecified reason. These frames are unencrypted and are easily spoofed. In a deauthentication attack, the attacker sends these faked deauthentication frames to the AP, the client, or both, or as a broadcast in the whole wireless network. It triggers the deauthentication process and knocks one or more clients off the wireless network. This is essentially a Wi-Fi denial of service attack, in that valid users are prevented from having normal access to the network. At minimum, it can be a frustrating experience for the users. In the hands of a skilled attacker, further information can then be collected from more destructive attacks, such as a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay? We can have insecure protocols, okay? FTP, HTTP, Telnet, SLIP. A lot of these protocols, the data is sent, the authentication data is sent in plain text. We can also have programmers who have set up backdoors into the systems, which are security flaws that allow unauthorized users to gain access into the system. Unless the network admin performs regular updates, the hacker can exploit these flaws A lot of legacy systems are particularly notorious for having backdoors written into the system. Other types of software that we have to be cautious of is Trojan horses, or what we call a Trojan. This is malicious software. A program that disguises itself as something useful but actually harms your system. We have viruses, okay, that we have to be cautious for. A virus is a program that will replicate itself with the intent to infect more computers, either through network connections when it piggybacks on other files or through an exchange of external storage devices. A virus may damage files or systems, or might simply just annoy users by flashing messages or pictures on the screen. A worm is a program that runs independently of other software, travels between computers and across networks. They may be transmitted by any type of file transfer, including email attachments. Worms do not alter other programs in the same way that viruses do, but they do carry viruses. Because they can transport and hide viruses, they should be concerned about picking up worms when you exchange files on the internet via email or on a flash drive. A bot, which we talked about already, which is short for robot, is a process that runs automatically without requiring a person to start it or to stop it. Bots can be beneficial or malicious, especially when used for ill intent. It does not require user interaction or to run or propagate itself. Instead, it connects to a central server called a command or control server. Bots can be used to damage or destroy computers' data or system files. They can issue objectionable content, launch DOS attacks, or open backdoors for further investigation. Bots are especially difficult to contain because of their fast, surreptitious, and distributed dissemination. And one of the ones that are cropping up more and more today, which are costing people a lot of money, is ransomware, which is a program that locks a user's data or computer system until the ransom is paid. And in most cases, the infection encrypts the data on the computer and then can also encrypt data on backup devices, removable storage devices, and even cloud storage devices. And there's an example of a version of the Jigsaw ransomware, which threatens to send the user's data to all contacts collected from the computer, unless a Bitcoin would be sent out.